Welcome to ilanomadvideo and our streamed GED math class. This math class will be streaming every Thursday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. In addition to catching the stream here on Thursdays, you can enroll in the free GED Math Course, and you'll get access to the Tuesday class stream that's not here on the channel, as well as the Friday test. Every Friday, there's a test based upon the classes that stream on Tuesday and Thursday. This way, you'll be getting the tools that you need to pass the GED Math Test. The free GED Math Course is free to enroll in. New classes stream every Tuesday and Thursday, and Friday is testing day. There's a link in the description of this video. Go ahead and enroll now. Even if you miss the beginning of the class, you can always join, because this class does repeat every 6 weeks. And now, here's the stream. All right, welcome to the fraction lesson. I want to encourage you. There's a few things that you need before you get going in this lesson. Number one, you need a pencil. Number two, you need a pencil sharpener. Number three, you need a notebook full of empty sheets for you to fill up with the notes you're going to take in this video. Number four, you need a calculator. And number five, I recommend this. Remember, it's all optional, but I recommend that you get the worksheet pack for this lesson so that you can practice everything that I'm showing you. I have specifically designed questions to really get you prepared for this GED math test. So I recommend that you get the worksheet pack. And if you have these 5 things, and if you have them when you're sitting down and watching this video, you are going to have GED math success. Let's jump in. The first thing I want to do in this video is to let you know specifically what we're going to cover in this video. Number one, you're going to learn how to add fractions. Number two, you are going to learn how to subtract fractions. Number three, you're going to learn how to multiply fractions. And number four, you're going to learn how to divide fractions. And then following that, you're going to learn how these skills are used in GED problems. So the fifth and final thing that we're going to cover in this video is how fractions as a skill is tested in GED problems. And for the most part, these are word problems, but there are also some other types of problems. Let's dive in. So when adding, subtracting, or even just comparing fractions, there are 4 steps. So whenever you are adding, subtracting, and I'm just going to abbreviate that, or comparing fractions, there are 4 steps. And so the first step is you want to find the lowest common denominator, or the LCD. The second step is that you want to create a new fraction. The third step is you want to perform the operation. And so that just simply means if it's addition or subtraction, you want to do that. So you want to perform the operation, and I'll abbreviate that. And then step 4, you want to reduce and simplify. And one of the things I want to remind you of as we're going through this video lesson here is that it's video. So it's meant to be paused and rewind. So as I'm talking and teaching here, I want you to feel free to pause it and rewind it as much as you need to get these steps down. Now, these four steps, this is what is really important for you to know. So I'm going to give you an example of a adding and a subtracting fraction problem. So let's do an adding one first. So let's take 4 and 2/5 and 3 and 3/8, and we're going to make that an adding problem. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to find the lowest common denominator. So step one is finding the lowest common denominator. And so there's two ways to do that. So this is the denominator. The denominator is the number on the bottom, so the 8 and the 5, and we want to find the lowest number that the multiples of these numbers have in common. So there's two ways to do that. So number one, you can just simply multiply these two numbers. And that won't always give you the lowest common denominator, but it'll give you a common denominator. And so if we simply multiplied 8 and 5, you'd get 40. Okay, and then the second way to find the lowest common denominator is run the multiples. So there's two ways to do it. One is simply to multiply the 5 times 8, and then the second way is to run the multiples. And when I say run the multiples, what I'm talking about is just making a chart of both denominators, 8 and 5, and then kind of making your own multiplication chart. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 times 1 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16, 8 times 3 is 24, 8 times 4 is 32, 8 times 5 is 40, 8 times 6 is 48, and so on. 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, 5 times 4 is 20, times 5 is 25, times 6 is 30, times 7 is 35, and times 8 is 40. So now we have found our lowest common multiple, because as you're going down the line here, no number is common until you get to 40. And so that's the second way. So the first way is you can simply multiply 8 times 5, and that might not always be the lowest common denominator, but it will be a common denominator, and it's enough to go forward. Or you can run the multiples. When you're dealing with small numbers, some of these will be easy to do in your head, especially as you get practice and do more of them. But that is the first step for either adding or subtracting a fraction, okay? So then the second step is to create a new fraction. So when we're talking about step 2, we're talking about creating a new fraction. And the way you do that is you say 8 goes into 40 5 times, and 5 times 3 is 15. And then you come up here and you do the same thing. 5 goes into 40 8 times. 8 times 2 is 16. And you write your 16 there. So again, step number 1 is finding the lowest common denominator. We did that and we got 40. Step 2 is creating a new fraction, and so we did that. So now here's our new fraction. Because in order to add, subtract, or compare fractions, the denominator has to be the same. And you'll see when we get to multiplying and division, the denominator does not have to be the same. But when we are adding and subtracting, the denominator has to be the same. So 8 goes into 40 5 times. 5 times 3 is 15. See, that way the 3 was increased by 5, becoming 15. The 8 was increased by 5, becoming 40. And then in this case, the 5 was increased by 8, becoming 40. And the 2 was increased by 8, becoming 16. So you're creating a new fraction, but it's still the same base. You've just increased it or multiplied it so that you could get it into a format that you can add or subtract. And now step 3 is simply performing the operation. So that's performing the operation, and the operation here is addition. So now you would just simply do 4 plus 3 is 7, and then 16 plus 15 is 31, all over 40. And so this is our final answer here, 7 31/40. So again, the final step would be to reduce or simplify. And so here there is nothing to reduce or simplify. If you need help with that, I do have a pre-GED booklet that you can get that'll walk through some of these more basic steps. But for a GED subject, I'm assuming that you're here and that you would know about reducing and simplifying, but there is none here to do. So 7 and 31/40 is our answer, and so that's how you add. Okay, so remember, again, this is all video, so all of this can be rewinded and replayed and paused, fast forwarded if you already know this, and but now you have that skill. So remember, when we first set out, we're going to add, we're going to subtract, we're going to multiply, and we're going to divide. So now let's do a subtraction using these same steps. So the next question we want to look at is a subtracting problem, and I'll just abbreviate that, and we're going to say 4 1/7 minus 3 2/5. Okay, so the first step we're going to do is we're going to find the lowest common denominator, remember, because that's step 1. Step 1 is LCD, and so in this case we can do it two ways. We can either just multiply both denominators, 7 times 5, and that's what I'm going to do. So that's going to give me 35. And then we're going to do step 2, which is create a new fraction. I'm just going to call it create new. And 5 goes into 35 7 times. 7 times 2 is 14. 7 goes into 35 5 times. 5 times 1 is 5. So now we've done our 2 steps. We found our lowest common denominator. We've created our new fraction. Now we're going to do step 3, which is perform the operation, which in this case the operation is subtraction, and so we're just going to do that. But now we run into a problem here, because at this level of math you cannot subtract 14 from 5. So you have to come over here and borrow. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to borrow 1 from that 4, and that becomes a 3. And then that 1 that I borrow, and here I want you to pay very close attention here. So we've borrowed this 1 from the 4, and that became 3. And I'm holding this 1 up here in the air because I want to show you something about it. So if we just simply put 1 next to here, and then we'll have 1 and 5/35, we still can't do the subtraction. So now we have to take this 1 and we have to express this 1 in terms of the denominator. So the denominator is 35, and so the way that I would express that 1 is 35 over 35, because 35 over 35 is indeed 1. So 5 plus 35 is 40 and 35, right? And so now we can come over here and do the operation, step 3, because 14 can be subtracted from 35, and that will give us 26 over 35. 3 minus 3 is 0. So the answer there would just be, get a better 5 there. The answer there would be 26 35ths. So again, now you see these same 4 steps, and then of course step 4 is reducing or simplifying, and there is no reducing or simplifying to do here. So in that case, we just leave it 26 35. So again, every single time, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And remember, as you're taking this course, you have your paper, you have your pencil, you have your eraser. So you take these steps and then you repeat them. And I just recommend doing about 15 or 20 of these, just making sure you have these skills down so that when you get to the test, you're ready to rock. You're ready to do the thinking part of this test. So far that's addition, that's subtraction. Now let's move to multiplication. Okay, now remember, everything that we're doing is to set you up for GED problems, right? So you're not going to really see many questions like the ones we're doing, if any, on the test. However, these skills are so important because they back up what you're going to see on the actual test, and you'll see that as we go more through this lesson here. So now let's talk about the steps to multiplying fractions. So here on the screen I have 2/3 times 1/2. So step one is to convert mixed numbers to improper fractions. So convert mixed numbers to improper, if there are any. In this case, in this example, there aren't any. Step two is, this is optional, is to cross cancel. Okay, and we'll see that in a minute. Step three is to perform the operation, right? Because you always have to do whatever it is. So in this case, we're talking about multiplication. And then step four is reducing or simplifying. Okay. So in this first example here, we have 2/3 times 1/2. So step one, convert mixed numbers. There are no mixed numbers. A mixed number is simply, for example, if there was a 3 there, then 3 2/3, that's a mixed number because there's a whole number here and then a fraction. But in this case, it's not a mixed number. Okay, so step two is cross-canceling. So what cross-canceling means is across the operation, if there are numbers that can be divided, that have a common divisor or a common number that you can divide from both of these numbers, then you can pull both of those numbers out and they remain equal, because this side of the operation and this side of the operation would be the same if I pulled this piece out and pulled this piece out the same. So when you do cross-canceling, what that means is I could say 2 goes into 2 one time and 2 goes into 2 one time. So we just cross that out, makes that 1. All that does, it just makes the math easier, because now we're doing 1 times 1, of course, is 1, and then 3 times 3, which is 3. So it just makes the math easier, but it is optional, so you don't have to do that, but I recommend that you do. And then I've already done step 3, perform the operation, which is multiplying straight across. 2 times 1 is, or sorry, 1 times 1 is 1, 3 times 1 is 3, and you would get 1/3 there. Now let's take another multiplying example. Let me use a mixed number this time. So let's say if we had 3 1/3 times 5 1/2. Okay, so now we do have step one, convert mixed numbers to improper fractions. So the way you do that is you take the denominator 3 and you multiply it by the whole number 3 and you add that to the numerator 1. So 3 times 3 is 9. Plus 1 is 10, and then you set that all over 3. So let me review that again so you can get a different color for emphasis. So 3 and 3 is multiplied, that becomes 9, and that becomes added to that 1, and you set it all over the denominator of 3. So 10 over 3 is the same as 3 1/3. And then you do that same thing here. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11. So that will be 11 over 2. And then again, we can cross cancel. 2 goes into 2 one time. 2 goes into 10 5 times. So we took a 2 out, right? Like I talked about cross canceling. Again, this is optional, but we can do it. 5 times 11 going across here is 55. And then 3 times 1 is 3. And then you get 55 over 3. Now, on the GED test, you always want to put the answer in this final simplified form, which will be a mixed number. So you would do 3 goes into 55, and so I'm just going to do a quick little division here. Again, the point of this lesson is not this. I'm assuming that you have this level of math. If you don't, you can get the pre-GED booklet. But 3 goes into 5 one time. 3 goes into 24. 3 goes into 25 8 times. Be 24 with a remainder of 1. So then we take that 18, then that remainder, and the third. So the final answer would be 18 over a third. Again, I'm just moving through that portion quickly because I'm assuming at this level of math preparation you have that. If you don't, again, there's other tools for that. So now we've seen 2 multiplying. So we've covered addition. We've covered subtraction, and now we're covering multiplication. The final one we'll do is division. Okay, so with division, the steps are very similar to multiplication, but let's just review them. So number one is mixed number to improper fraction, the converting. Number two, this is where it gets different. You're going to change the division to multiplication. And then three, you're going to flip the right side of the operation. So we're going to flip the right of the operation, abbreviating operation there. Step four is optional. Cross cancel. Step five is perform the op. So to abbreviate that, perform op. And step six, of course, is always reduce and simplify. Okay, so let's just take 2 5/8 divided by 1/16. So again, mixed number, so we don't have a mixed number here, but we certainly do here. So step one, we're going to convert that. So 8 times 2 is 16. Plus 5 is 21, so that's 21 all over 8. And then that's just dropping that down, divided by 1/16. So that's step one. So step one is converting, whoops, get a highlighter there. Step one is converting, and so we've done that here. Okay, step two is to change the operation from division to multiplication. So we're going to drop that 21/8 down. And so now we've done that. Step two is changing division to multiplication. And then step three is flipping the right side of the equation. So the right side of the equation, the right side of the operation. This is the operation here. The right side, of course, is over here, so that's 1/16. So we're going to flip that, meaning flip it over. And so now I'm going to come over here, and so flip that to 16 over 1. Okay, and so now we've done step three, which is flipping, right? So step one in yellow, you can see we've converted. Step two, we've changed from division to multiplication. Step three, we flipped it. Step four, we're going to do, nope, but before I move on, let me just explain this. So because division and multiplications are opposites of one another, that's why you're able to do this. So dividing something by 1/16 is the same as multiplying it by its opposite, 16 over 1. It's its opposite, it's reciprocal. So that's why we can do that. So now division gets changed to multiplication. We flip the right side of the equation. And remember, this is video. You can pause it and you can rewind it and you can re-listen to everything I just said. Step four is optional cross-canceling. And of course, you already know I like cross-canceling. So we're going to do some cross-canceling here with those two numbers. And so 8 goes into 8 one time, 8 goes into 16 two times, just makes it easier. And then step 5 is perform the operation. I'm going to perform the operation, multiplying straight across there. So 21 times 2 is much easier than multiplying 21 times 16. So 21 times 2 is 42, and then 1 times 1 is 1, and then so the answer would be 42. So again, the steps to and then our final step is to reduce, simplify, but that's 42, so there's nothing to reduce or simplify there. So let's just run this problem back from the top. We had 2 5/8 divided by 1/16. We converted, step one, this mixed number here to an improper fraction. We did step two, we changed from division to multiplication. We did step three, we flipped it from 1/16 to 16 over 1. Step four, we did our optional cross-canceling. Step five, we performed the operation. 21 times 2 is 42, 1 times 1 is 1. And then I guess we did kind of reduce or simplify by taking 42 over 1 to 42. So we did all 6 steps. Okay, and this is how you multiply fractions. Now remember, Everything that we're doing, everything that I'm showing you how to do in these steps is to get you to do the GED problems, which I'm going to show you in a moment here. But just to review, we've done adding, we've done subtracting, we've done multiplying, and now we've done dividing. So now you know the 4 things that you can do with the fraction. And this skill, once you start practicing this, and again, I recommend you do 10 to 20, some of you might need to do even more of these problems so that you get this skill down. This skill is going to serve you so much on your GED math test journey. Okay, so now that we know how to work with adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing fractions, now we're going to go to word problems. And this is very important, what I'm going to share with you right now. So again, this is videos. You want to be rewinding and pausing this section of the video to make sure that you get it. So whenever you're approaching a word problem, and I know this is going to be very hard, but trust me, you have to get used to doing this. You have to take this 2-step process. In step 1 is identifying the question, and step 2 is stating your path. And this is important because this is not just simply a math test, but it's really actually called the GED Math Reasoning Test. And that reasoning piece is very important. So that's where we go from just the skills that we were just doing earlier on in this lesson to now the reasoning portion. And the reasoning portion is going to be very important because it's asking you to think critically about the information that you're reading and applying the skill there. So let's just look at this as a sample. We're not going to actually do this problem here, but I'm just going to break this problem down. So when it says ID the question, what you want to do, and you want to do this every single time, is you want to go and locate the question. Now, 9 times out of 10, the question is going to be the phrase or the sentence that appears before the question mark, right? So we all know what that is. So whenever we see that question mark, that's going to let us know what the question actually is. Now, so the question is what fraction? So when you see that word fraction, you're just going to draw the fraction bar because it's asking you about a fraction. And it says of their total monthly income. So the of their total monthly income portion, that goes under here because that's what they're asking the fraction about. So what fraction of their total monthly income does Connie earn? And so Connie goes here on top. So let me repeat that because this is something that's going to really help you to break down the word problems. So you want to always go identify the question, and 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the sentence that appears before the question mark. Sometimes it's not, but in most cases, you can kind of follow this rule. And because it's asking you about a fraction, so you just draw that fraction bar right away. Of, that goes on the bottom, that's what the fraction is about, and then the piece or the part, Connie's income, goes on top. And then step 2 is stating your path. So what you want to do there is simply just take down information. So you can put C for Connie, and so she's at $12.35 a month. And then you have T for Tom. He's at $9,880 every month. And so of their total monthly income, so you get the total, you're actually going to add those two. To get Connie, you already know that, so you can put that up there. And then you would just simply add the $12.35 and $9.80 and put that under there, and then reduce that fraction. So again, everything that I have showed you in this slide here of this video, this is the key. This is the math reasoning test. And so a lot of times you're going to look at a problem, and if you just jump in, I'm telling you, you're going to get lost and you're not going to know what to do. But if you use this 2-step method, you are going to have success. Okay, so now we are going to break these word problems down. And so we're just going to, for simplicity's sake, we're going to do 4 word problems together. And this is coming from the worksheet pack that's offered here in the course. But we're going to do 4 of these problems just to kind of show you what to do. So just for simplicity's sake, we're just going to review the last one. It'll help kind of reinforce the learning. So again, it says what fraction of their total monthly income does Connie earn? So we're going to do our step one, which is ID the question, and so that's what fraction does she earn. So we're going to put Connie up here, and then the total down here. And then we're going to state your path. That's step two. That's just pulling information from the problem. So we know that Connie is 1,235. We know her husband Tom is 9,880. And so we know that Connie goes up here on top. And then their total, 1,235 plus 9,880 is going to give us 11,115. And I'm not going to reduce this. Again, I talked about earlier on, we do have a pre-GED booklet that will give you some of these base level skills. So I'm just assuming you have this, but if you reduce it, you're going to get 1/9, and that is our answer in answer D there. So again, it is just following these two steps every single time. Let's move on to the next word problem. So this next problem is similar to a word problem, but is more just a straight ahead problem, but using the skill of fraction. And so this is something that's going to involve both the skill of adding and subtracting. So let's jump in. So it says, if the following set of fractions are increasing by the same rate, find the missing fraction. So again, nothing changes. We still use our two-step method of identifying the question. And so we're looking for the missing fraction. Okay, then number two, we're going to state our path. And so we know that the fractions are increasing by the same rate. So I'm just going to put increasing by same rate. And then we have our list of fractions up here. So if they're increasing by the same rate, we have to find out what that rate is. And so in order to find that rate, we're going to take the two fractions that are next to each other, because that's how we'll find the rate of the increase. So I'm going to take my 5/6 minus my 2/3. Okay, and then of course we're going to just follow those same steps we learned earlier, which is number one is finding the lowest common denominator, which I'm sure you can clearly see is going to be 6. 3 goes into 6 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. 6 goes into 6 1 times. 1 times 5 is 5. Okay, so now we've created our new fractions, and now step 3, we're going to perform the operation, which is subtraction. 4 minus 5 is 1, 6. So now, on the GED test, this is something where it could encourage us to think that this is the answer, but it actually isn't. This is the rate. The question is not about the rate. The question is about the missing fraction, so that's why we properly identify that. So now to find the missing fraction, what we then have to do is do addition. So we take our 1/3 over here, and we add the rate that it increases by, which is 1/6. And so, of course, the lowest common denominator is going to be 6. 6 goes into 6 1 time. 1 times 1 is 1. 3 goes into 6 2 times. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. So now we're performing the operation after we've created our fraction. And then we reduce that, and then that gives us 1/2. And so the answer to this question would be 1/2 right here. So again, just every single time we're doing this two-step method, and I know that this is a challenge, but this is where the reasoning comes in. See, so it's not just what's 5/6 minus 2/3, but it's reasoning that if I need to find the rate, I need to take the two fractions that are next to each other so I can see what that rate is. That's what we did here, subtraction. And then I came over here and added that in to find the missing fraction, addition. So now, so far, we've used some of the skills already that we've learned how to add and subtract the fractions. And as we just did in the previous one, a little bit of reducing. Let's move on. All right, so here with this question, so we get Winston built a house for 1/5 less than Carlos did. Carlos's building costs were $115,000. How much were Winston's costs? And then we get these options here. Okay, so in this case, what we're going to be looking at is the skill of multiplying fractions. And so, of course, we're going to follow our same two-step method. So identifying the question, And then step 2, stating your path. So the question is here is how much were Winston's cost? So we're just going to put Winston's cost. We know that Winston's cost was 1/5 less than Carlos. And we know that Carlos, his costs were $115,000. So again, this is called the math reasoning test. So the reasoning is what you have to think out, right? So you have the question and you have these two pieces. You have 1/5 less and you know how much it is. So the reasoning step is to find out what we need to know what is 1/5 of 115,000. So now we're doing multiplication. And so 1/5 of 115,000, you just put that over 1. Of course, you can do some cross canceling here. So 5 goes into 5 one time, and 5 goes into 115,000, 23,000 times. And then the math is real easy then. 1 times 23,000, and then 1 times 1 is 1, so you would get 23,000 all over 1, and of course, equaling just 23,000. So, but now, here's one of the things I want to draw to your attention. So here we get our answer, and we've done all this work, and we see our answer here. But that's not the question. That's why this process is so important. The question is, what is Winston's cost? And we know that his costs were 1/5 less than Carlos's, and so we know that 1/5 is 23,000. So we have one final step of subtracting 23,000 from 115,000, and then that is going to give us 92,000. And so our actual answer is C. So again, if you don't set this method up, you might go for that wrong answer. And in the multiple choice questions, for sure, one of the common errors is going to be in the multiple choice, if not two of the common errors. So you have to steer clear from that, and you do that by taking the two-step process. Again, this is the mathematical reasoning test, not just the math test. So you see that there's a lot of math here, but really what we're doing is the reasoning. The reasoning that, we need to take 1/5 times 115,000. They're not just simply asking us what's 1/5 of 115,000, but they're cloaking it in this word problem here and asking us to use some reasoning to figure out the math that we use. That's why this two-step process saves us every time. All right, so now here we are at the final word problem and the final question of this lesson. So again, just reminding you that you can always rewind, pause, fast forward, but everything that we're doing is getting you ready to have success. So we showed you the skills, and now we're showing you word problems, and we're showing you the two steps that you need in order to have success. So that first step is identifying the question, and that second step is stating your path. And so this says which expression shows the fabric. So we know we're looking for expression that shows how many yards of fabric Beth used. So I'm going to say expression for fabric. Just abbreviate it and then state our path. We know that Beth had 343 yards of fabric, and we know that she can make 14 dresses from this fabric. So do we A, take 343 minus 14 and divide it by 14? Obviously that's crazy. Do we B, 343 divided by 14? Yeah, so if you take the total amount of fabric and divide it by the number of dresses, then that expression would show how many yards of fabric can be used to make each dress. And so in this case, the answer would be B. 343 divided by 14 dresses, and then it'll tell you the amount of fabric for each dress. And so that would be the correct expression. So I hope this video has been helpful to you. And remember, the practice test that follows is going to be a practice test addressing everything that you learned in this video. So I hope that you've taken notes. Review those notes. If you've decided to get the worksheet packet, definitely dive in now and start doing those problems and get ready for this practice test tomorrow.